Thanks everyone for being here. We're going to get started just about 5 minutes. 6:15 start. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our forum. We are going to get started. No problem. I'm just going to start off with a little bit of expectations. Hello, everyone. So my name is Joel Schumann. My pronouns are he, him. Thank you so much to our candidates for coming. I'm going to go over the expectations and the format. Just at the top, if you'd like any snacks, any refreshment, please grab them over there. The restrooms are out this way through that door. We're going to start off. Candidates will be given up to 5 minutes for introductions. The moderators will ask 2 questions, where each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to respond. At the end of each question, candidates may take a minute to respond to other candidates. We will then accept questions from the audience. Questions from the audience may be directed at a single candidate or all the candidates. Candidates will have 3 minutes to respond. If a question is directed at a single candidate, that candidate may respond first. Other candidates can choose whether or not to respond. There are multiple ways to submit a question. If you're watching over the live stream, please submit a question in the chat. Our moderators will see the question and pass it along. If you're in this room and have a question, please write it on one of the note cards and pass it to one of our volunteers. Volunteers will select from the questions submitted on the live stream and in person to form the queue. If you are in person and would like to have the microphone to ask your question, please include your name on the card and we will pass you a mic, and then you will be able to ask the question and interact. Please introduce yourself before speaking with your name and pronouns. There will be no closing statements. I ask that all of our participants agree to our code of conduct, assume good faith in your fellow comrades, know whether you need to step up or step back. Please recognize and respect others' feelings, background, and cultural differences. We have one mic, so do not interrupt or speak while others are talking. Please respect the facilitators. Please have some fun and have a sense of humor. Please note that the microphone is for the live stream and not for in person. So even if you can project, we would like the people in the live stream to have full participation. And also that means it's really helpful to respect the one mic policy. The mic needs to be uncomfortably close to your mouth. That's how it works. Candidates, we will now begin with introductions. You will have up to 5 minutes. I will wave a note card at 30 seconds left, which I will obtain shortly. You do not need to use your full time for any of these. In your introduction, please answer, what experiences have led you to run for district attorney? How will your background, whether in law, local politics, or otherwise, inform your agenda in office? Once we get to the complete 5 minutes, if you have not stopped speaking, I will say thank you for your answer, and then after that, Solidarity Forever will begin playing out of the speakers immediately. We actually can't do that, but please respect for the rules. And with that, we are going to please start with Martin with your introduction. I'm going to time you.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Martin Moore. I'm an attorney, county commissioner, and honored to be running for district attorney here in Buncombe County. I think it's a great way to start of what led me to this path of wanting to run for district attorney. And that, for me, began in law school, undergrad, actually. Began my career at Chapel Hill, wanted to be a Tar Heel. Learned a lot about what it meant to advocate, had a brief stint of volunteering with the North Carolina Center on Actual Innocence, and as one does when they're a poli-sci and philosophy major, you go to law school or you're unemployed. So learned a lot about what I wanted advocacy to look like, how we make systems better, how we improve systems, and the law is one of the best ways to do that. In law school, got involved with as many things as I could, interned in the Baltimore County Public Defender's Office one summer, 2 years of volunteering with the Innocence Project, and really just came to appreciate what our system can do when it works really well, but also what it does when it fails people miserably. And I think that exposure gave me enough desire and heart to try to be in the Public Defender's Office, so I started my career right here in Asheville. And one of the great parts about that job was getting to work with adults and juveniles, but particularly the juveniles, getting to help the young kids who are going through the system, being exposed to this terrible moment in life, kids as young as 9 years old who are staring down a courtroom at an age where I was barely being able to color particularly well. And when we had those moments of advocating for them, you feel good, you see a lot of good outcomes, but you also see the bad side. And it left me with this sentiment: we don't throw our children away. And that commitment for me became so real. I didn't want to wait and just be reactive. I wanted to be proactive. I joined the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, served on that for about 5 years, became chair, wanted to do something to break that cycle, got involved with Open Doors, campaigned for Southern Equality. Every lefty cause that would have me, I tried to join up with because I knew that it meant something to get ahead of the problem. When that wasn't enough and you show up in enough rooms, public service continues to call. Ran for county commission against the last sitting Republican in our county, and we did a great job, and we flipped that last seat. Since then, I've worked in public and private practice, seen criminal defense cases, worked with victims, worked with survivors, worked with defendants, people of every background, and just came to see if we work together, we can improve that system. And now in the district attorney's office, there is a unique and rare opportunity to change that dialogue, to work on systems reform, and do the easy part, which is the prosecution, and the hard part, which is system reform and crime prevention. You're going to hear me say those words a lot because I think we can focus, and we'll be very clear with you about what our priorities are as DA. Gun crimes and domestic violence are front and center for me. The crimes that are harming our community the most are the ones that need to be addressed. But I think we're seeing right now in this moment that we have to use our voices. It's not enough to sit on the sidelines and hope that the system changes. You have to fight for that system to change, and you have to use your voice to do that. And for the past couple months, I don't have to explain to you how bad things have been, but it's also highlighted for us how critical it is that when we have these moments, you show your leadership stripes and you show that you're committed to your community by using that voice and being vocal about the things that are wrong, because it's not enough to just say you're progressive. You have to live those values. So I'm looking forward to, over the next 2 hours or so, however long you'll have me, to sharing those values with you and what my philosophy is going to be in running this office, because I do think I will happily share with you what our priorities are from the district attorney's office, but I'm also going to share with you that the most important power is figuring out what you don't charge when you're running for DA and when you're serving in that office, and that's what leadership truly looks like from the DA position. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Courtney Booth. In May of 2022, I ran for district attorney against the incumbent Todd Williams. 10,758 people put their faith in me, and I'm most appreciative. I'm back asking for your support again. I narrowly lost a number that I will never forget, 101 votes. That's how I lost to the incumbent Todd Williams. So I'm back. Let me give you a little bit of history about me. I've lived here for 20 years, 20 plus years. I thought I started work on October 17th of 2005 at the Public Defender's Office here in Buncombe County, but the state has me, I believe, with a start date of the 5th, and I'm not going to tell them otherwise. But I started here in 2005 at the Public Defender's Office. Someone gave me a chance, Mr. Huffstetter, the court-appointed, or the appointed public defender, gave me an opportunity. And I moved up here with my cat Buster all by myself, because I did everything by myself, because I saw growing up that I had a very strong mother. She was a nurse practitioner, and so I knew how to do things, and I knew how to get things done. And so here I come by myself up Old Fort Mountain, nearly breaking down, and I've been here ever since. So when I ran in 2022, I realized that we've never had a DA that matches our ideals here in Buncombe County. And when we elected the incumbent, Mr. Williams, I actually was boots on the ground. I remember walking through Kenilworth and how hard that was, walking through Kenilworth, because it's all a hill. And that was when I was much younger. But I remember knocking on doors in hopes that we would have a change and that we would have an actual progressive DA, and we never got that. So in 2022, little old me, and I say little old me because I'm very humble. That's how I was taught. That's how I was raised, to have humility. I drove past the Board of Elections not once but twice because I was really scared. And I had no earthly idea what it was to be a politician, and I'm not a politician. I've been serving this community for over 20 years, indigent defense. The reason I wanted to run is, again, we can do something different. I have a different perspective because of my background, but I also am the most experienced candidate. I've done this job for over 20 years now. When I ran in 2022, I was the only candidate that talked about reproductive rights. That was well before Dobbs came down, and how you can use your prosecutorial discretion to support those rights if, God forbid, we're back in the crosshairs. And I still stand dedicated to preserving those rights, even though they've been drastically taken, to allow that women could still get that health care in our community. Again, like Mr. Moore mentioned, right now we're at a time when we all don't know what to do. Who better than an empathetic, strong-willed public defender who has stood up against the government for the little guy and the little gal for 20 years than to lead us through this path? Everybody that knows me knows that I will not back down. If I know something is wrong, I will stand my ground, and I will fight to the death if I need to. That's how I was raised. I'm also from West Virginia. I forgot to mention that. That's probably part of all this. But when I see the things on the news, I thought to myself, why on earth did we not charge immediately? Because I will tell you, when I saw what happened to Renee Good, and I heard them say, well, they won't let us investigate. As a public defender, and I've got a colleague back here, Carrie, and I've got a colleague, Joe, over here, we have tried cases that police have charged poor people almost immediately with hardly any investigation, way less than the evidence they had in that case. And again, it takes somebody bold, it takes somebody with empathy, it takes somebody who has courage. I'm back again, and I know criminal law through and through. So just because I would shift sides doesn't mean I wouldn't know what I was doing. It's the same thing at a different angle. So thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Curtis, and I currently serve as your senior violent crimes prosecutor and also over gun crimes. I am so happy to be here with you this evening and have the opportunity to talk to you about my vision for Buncombe County. To tell you a little bit about myself, no one would have expected me to be where I am. So for starters, I went to Appalachian State when I was 18 years old, barely 18 years old, went for 1 year, had a .75 GPA, dropped out, went home, and said, I want to work. And my family moved up here. This was in 2000 because I'm older than I look. And I got a job at Ruby Tuesday within walking distance because I didn't have a car. And then I got a job as a hostess, and then I started waiting tables, and then one day they needed someone to pick up dishwashing shifts, and then one day they needed someone to start cooking. And by the time I was 25, I was an executive chef over multi-million-dollar restaurants in Charlotte. I have a decade of experience managing large staffs, managing money, and managing people. And the thing about working in kitchens, right, is that it brings everybody together from all walks of life, all bound together with a common good that is bringing comfort and service to the community. It means that whether or not you come from a different country, whether or not you come from a different socioeconomic background, that we're all working in it together, and you learn how to meet people where they are at, and you treat people with dignity and respect, and you provide a service to the community in the same way that you would want to be treated. And because I did that, I advanced very quickly, and because I work very hard and I understand systems. It also bears mentioning that you might not be surprised that with what's going on with ICE, that is very upsetting and near and dear to my heart, because this notion that these people are criminals, those are people that I know. These are actual people. And from a prosecutorial perspective, is what we don't talk about is how difficult it is to prosecute American citizens, habitual felons, habitual violent felons, who are charged with very, very serious violent crimes against immigrants who we can't prosecute because ICE has deported the victim before we could prosecute the case. We have lost sight of so many things. At any rate, when I was 29, when my sister graduated from Asheville High School and I was sitting in her graduation, I had that moment of realizing remembering what that felt like when the world's your oyster and you can do anything that you want. And I realized that I had been making excuses, that I thought I was too far into this career, that I couldn't, I was already invested. And I called my parents and I said, I'm going to go be a lawyer now. And they said, what? And I said, no, I'm going to go be a lawyer now. And so I stepped down to sous chef, promoted someone else to executive chef, went to night classes at Central Piedmont Community College and took online classes, and then got a full ride in a year to Chapel Hill, where I double majored in peace, war, and defense, the same program as your clerk of court, Jean Marie Christie. We were there together. and political science, and I minored in Spanish for business because maintaining that ability to communicate with people where they're at is important to me. I went to Campbell Law, where I specialized in not only prosecutorial practice, but also in advanced trial strategy, and I got book awards. That's the top of your class, for example, in forensic science and understanding evidence and advanced criminal procedure. And what that means is that girl that got a .75 GPA right out of high school graduated law school at Campbell, number 7 in my class. I started interning between my second and third year of law school and tried 12 cases in the Durham DA's office as an intern, which is otherwise unheard of. And I did that because I could walk in and talk to people and meet them where they were at, and not only give victims honor and justice, but also look at the defendant and figure out how we could prevent recidivism and be creative in figuring out dispositions that get justice, but also prevent that person from coming back. And that's exactly what I have continued to do as a prosecutor. And with 10 years of experience, what I am describing to you, looking at cases holistically, not just considering the facts of the case, but also the individual defendant and the individual victim, survivor, is being able to build dispositions that honor that trauma, that understand how trauma works, and understands that if we are serious about reducing crime and preventing recidivism, we have to look at the root causes of crime. It doesn't mean that in every case, and particularly super violent cases, sometimes the facts dictate that that person has to serve time. But in others, we can be creative and work collaboratively in the community, and that's exactly what I do. I am a prosecutor. I am a progressive prosecutor, and I'm glad to be here and ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. You can keep the microphone. First question is going to be for you. It's got to be uncomfortably close to your mouth, please, so that our online audience. So the question is now going to be addressed to Katie, then Courtney, and then to Martin. Sophie, please.
That was a great segue. What root causes of crime? Because that's your first question. While prosecutors are tasked with addressing crime, socialists often emphasize the root causes of crime, which lie in economic and social inequalities. How have you actively worked for, and how do you plan to work for, decarceration and/or abolition? What will you do to address the root causes of crime?
You'll have 3 minutes to answer the question.
So I mentioned that a cornerstone of my campaign and my prosecutorial philosophy is trauma-informed prosecution. So let's start by talking about what do I mean about trauma. So traumatic incidents are those that combine an incident that is fear with an actual or perceived lack of control. When you take that definition, you can understand very easily where that comes into play. If you see someone get shot, you yourself are shot. But what it doesn't also consider is people who grow up in poverty, people who experience adverse childhood experiences or experience violence in their home. And what we know is because of adverse childhood experiences that those are very strong indicators of criminality, right? When people grow up fearful and afraid of not having their basic needs met, that it impacts their brain development and impacts somebody's ability to be forward thinking and thinking about consequences and planning. When you understand that and you can look at individuals, you can understand how they got there, and you can also understand why we see things like people that end up, what we know, right? Mental health and addiction go hand in hand, and you can't address those without looking and understanding trauma. And that's why trauma-informed prosecution has the power to change the narrative and change the criminal justice system. Because and so much that Mr. Moore said prosecution is the easy part, that can only be said by someone who's never been a prosecutor, because I'm here to tell you when you are dealing with very complicated crimes and people's lives on the line and very traumatized victims, there's nothing easy about it, because when you sit there and you know that whatever decision you make is going to impact that person for the rest of your life or their life, that's when the rubber hits the road, and that's why 10 years of experience matters, and that's why trauma-informed prosecution is so important, because it's not about punishment. It's about how do we never come back here again with this individual, one person at a time. It's also why I go out into the community and I talk to community partners, and I serve on the School Justice Coalition, why I serve on the multi-sector public health response to juvenile gun violence, because I'm interested in talking to mental health professionals and community organizations to say, what are these kids experiencing and what can I do so that they never come to my doorstep? Because once they are at my doorstep, once they've laid 74 rounds into 3 houses over a quarter bag of weed, it's too late. That we've already failed them. So that's why I'm running for DA, and that's how I'm addressing the root causes of crime, because if we do that, we ultimately change the narrative and stop incarcerating people that we can otherwise help never come back to where they were.
So since I've been a public defender for 20 years, and to tell you a little bit about my growing up, I grew up middle class. I had all the comforts. I didn't know how many people weren't like me, right? Until I got out there for my public defender job, or maybe in law school. And I started realizing, and I tell people this, and it's unfortunate, a lot of people, you make it in life because you're born lucky or unlucky, right? The idea that we have an American dream and you can achieve anything it's very difficult. And it's harder and harder because people can't afford housing, people can't afford food, people can't are single parent households and can't work to achieve all of these things. So I realized after all these years how hard people have it. And because I've been in public defense, I've connected with these families, I've connected with my clients, and I've realized that the criminal justice system, is what they call it, justice, works to trap people that are born unlucky. And once they get in the system, they can't get out of the system because they come up for air and they get a few breaths and then they get shoved back under. And so I've always tried to untangle as much as I can in my role as a defense attorney, which is why I thought in 2022, why don't I get more power to do the right thing for people? To give you an example, right now, the current DA brought in a Walmart day of prosecution. Walmart. All the loss prevention folks come from Walmart. They sit in the courtroom, and they're the loss prevention people for Walmart. What I've seen that causes, they're not doing their job at preventing their internal theft like they should be doing, because that's why they're paid to do that. They're actually letting our clients just walk out the door, and then they're calling the police department to have them charged. And then they come into the criminal justice system where they keep the turbine going of being captured in the system. So just to give you a tangible example, I'm not going to honor Walmart prosecution days. I wouldn't, because they are a huge freaking corporation. They have all the money to thwart theft if they choose to do so, instead of asking the police department. It's time. Okay, sorry. But again, you have to realize in making decisions, that's just an example, but the generational effects of putting people in prison for habitual felon that I oppose are drastic, because it doesn't just affect that person, it affects their entire family. When you make a decision to put a very young person in prison for 70 months, 90 months, 225 months for drug trafficking, for example, a nonviolent, you've thrown their life away. And I would not do that.
Thank you very much.
Alternatives.
So I really like that question, that specifically the portion where we're addressing what are the root causes of crime, because I think you deserve an answer to that. At its core, what we see in the justice system. Keep the microphone here. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. At its core, what we're dealing with is poverty and lack of opportunity, right? 80% of the things that we're talking about are rooted in poverty and lack of, it's an affordability crisis. Our whole country is experiencing that right now. And the one thing that I've learned from living in any number of places, I was born just outside of Atlanta. Lived middle and high school outside of Baltimore, families all from New York. The one thing that is common in all those places is they all suffer from the same problem, is a lack of affordability. And that drives people to insane situations where they're put in the most untenable positions. In practice, what we do to address that is the really important part, and I think the part that you're going to see will resonate the most in what our different visions are for our community. For me, that means we tackle the problem head on. I don't want to wait until we get people into the court system before we start trying to help them. A big part of why I left the public defender's office to go into private practice and then eventually to get involved in all the nonprofits that were education-based, the nonprofits that were focused on equity and equality, and all those words we're not supposed to say anymore, is because preventative is the best answer for everything we can do. And I truly believe, whether it's crime prevention or whether it's looking at our schools and saying, how do we address the school-to-prison pipeline, that only happens if we're direct and honest about where the problem starts. If you are hoping that the courthouse figures that out for you, you are already off to a bad start. So for me, a big part of that is saying, don't just preach it, let's be about that life. And telling people, honestly, what do you think is going to fix this? It's going to require our schools to be fully funded. And until we start doing that, we're going to continue to have the same criminal justice issues over and over and over again. People ask me, what do you think will be the most helpful insight? I can share with you the time I've had in the public defender's office. I worked with the kids. I saw them. I'm watching some of them grow up. I see them in the system still. I see them come up in the headlines, and it breaks my heart. I see people who are going through the other side of it, volunteering with Helpmate and Our Voice, and the folks who are screaming for justice in our domestic violence situations, also tied to an affordability crisis, because those people are not getting just outcomes because they are leaving their work to sit in court time after time after time. If we want to be honest about fixing our system, we have to name those things. Yes, it's a policy approach, but the DA is the only person who's in a position to meaningfully change this like that. And I'll share with you one of the things that I take seriously about this, and sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it burns bridges. I am so committed to this that on commission, I will tell you why I vote no for our budget. Until we fully fund our schools, we cannot say we are being serious about anything we're doing to improve our society and to end this cycle of criminal justice, school-to-prison pipeline, and all the harms that we're talking about in rooms like this. I'm looking forward to changing a lot of that as your next DA.
Any of the candidates may now have 1 minute to follow up, if any of the candidates would like.
Yeah, so I think I get a little off topic because it was the second I needed the question repeated. But right, so obviously prevention.
Please talk directly into the mic.
I'm so sorry. I feel like I am. Obviously, prevention is the best, right? And I would agree with Martin. Education is fundamental. When we do felony pleas in Superior Court, it's the highest level of education you've ever achieved, and that's going to be a question. And the judge wants to know whether or not you know what you're doing, you have an understanding what you're pleading to, and it's almost always less than a 12th grade education. And so again, I do agree that we have to do better for everyone out of the gate. But again, going back to being lucky and unlucky, when people come into the system that are unlucky, we have to work to get them out of the system. Waiving fines, not putting them directly into prison, giving them an opportunity to get into diversion programs. I sat on the board of drug court for many, many years, and I saw lives change.
That's 1 minute. Anyone else like to follow up?
The district attorney does not write the law. The district attorney has no power over funding schools. The district attorney has no power in funding the schools. And so one would wonder why, if in a position to fund the schools now and fight that fight, why run for district attorney? Because the role of the district attorney is to protect our community and to enforce the law, and to use that discretion to enforce the law in a way that makes our communities safer. That means doing preventative measures like going out in the community and being creative in how we resolve cases in ways that can prevent recidivism, that can address those underlying traumas that are in fact the root causes of crime. That's my statement. Thank you.
I will share with you, I think we already have a system that has the infrastructure in place. The question is, who's going to show up and do the work? As a county commissioner, I can share with you, we have put together 1 million initiatives. On this stage, we've talked about several of them. The multi-stakeholder coalition made by the county. Our school system, funded by the county. Our school board, county and city-based. When we're talking about how we're going to address crime prevention, the missing piece is having a DA at the table. Because I can say whatever I want from the policy side. I can say whatever I want as an attorney. I will scream in court on behalf of survivors, standing there with people who are going through that course system every day of the week. But there is no substitute for having a district attorney who's going to be present with me and talk about how we create that mental health court. Talk to me about how we're going to improve those outcomes. not just sum this up to say someone was born lucky or unlucky. I know where I was born in life. I live that every single day. That wasn't luck. This is a system we have to change, and we can only do that when we start being honest about why we're at where we're at. Accepting that this is just how things are is not acceptable to
Thank
me,
you,
and I want
Martin.
to see that change.
This next question is going to be for Courtney, then Martin, then Katie. You'll have 3 minutes to respond. And please just, the mic has to be uncomfortably close for the live stream. So sorry.
Sorry.
Pretrial practices have come under scrutiny across the nation. Oh, before I start this, if you have a question on a note card, please pass it up to our volunteers so that they can collect the questions. Our volunteers are here. We're going to collect questions and ask them after this next question, so please pass your questions up. All right, question for Courtney. Pretrial practices have come under scrutiny across the nation, with debates around both community safety and equity to pretrial defendants. While judges have ultimate discretion over pretrial release in the majority of cases in the state, district attorneys have influence over the pretrial conditions that they request. What are your key concerns regarding pretrial practices? In your capacity as district attorney, what would you do to influence pretrial practices in Buncombe County?
So we're hardshipped right now because the Republicans passed House Bill, I believe 307, Arenas Law, and they passed that within months after the tragedy that occurred on the train in Charlotte. So the problem is now we can't get people out of the county jail. And I'm talking if you have 3 prior class 1 misdemeanors or higher in the past 10 years, you get a cash bail. You cannot have an unsecured bond. So that's affecting the poorest of the poor, and we're getting people stuck in custody for trespass, for example, for false report to 911, or just a sundry of things. So I think that's the law, unfortunately, and that just started December 1st. So I have the experience, and I'm ambitious, and I'm a hard worker. I would focus on going through those cases, right? Obviously, trespasses, I don't care about. I don't care if somebody is standing underneath a bridge because it's cold, and Asheville Police Department, who accounts for 57% of the arrests in the Buncombe County Jail, 57%, give or take, has arrested this person. Get rid of those. Get people out of this jail, because they should not be sitting there for trespass with a $100 bond for a month. That's inappropriate for people. So pretrial is a county agency that came into the light because of several lawsuits and some malfeasance that's been alleged. Quite frankly, it's a county agency. I believe Mr. Moore has some oversight over that actually as a county commissioner. It needs redesigned, because we right now are not able to get people out of the jail right now. So to me, it needs to be redesigned. Those folks need to be reprogrammed into a different position of still helping the same population, but doing it in a different fashion, because it's useless right now. House Bill 307 has taken away the ability for essentially poor people with somewhat of a record to get out with an unsecured bond. So I would focus on cleaning out and getting the jail population down. Right now, we're exceeding capacity. It's not safe. It's not safe for inmates. We've already heard that we have a lot of jail issues in Buncombe County. It's not safe for inmates. It's not safe for guards. And we need people that are an otherwise danger. That cash bail should not keep us safe anyhow. They need to be in custody pending trial, such as Ryan Houston. And we saw when all of that went down that Ryan Houston was never tried by Todd Williams' DA's office. All he had to do was to be tried, and none of that would have happened. I would vow to expedite cases, try the dangerous folks, but let people out of custody that are sitting there because they're too poor to afford bond.
So addressing your question about pretrial release, by constitutional right, you're presumed innocent until proven guilty. So our concepts of how we improve pretrial, I will tell you there's 28 plus departments in our county. That is one of many that we can always do better at. But what I will share with you is when we're talking about non-dangerous individuals, people who are simply awaiting their day in court, that's a completely different conversation. I think we have to focus on the DA's actual role in this. Judges release people from custody. The district attorney provides information to the judge to determine whether or not that person is safe. The best way to have a good metric for how someone is going to be determined safe or unsafe is to have seen both sides of the equation. I've worked with people who have been on the survivor side, people who are facing an injustice of having to leave their work, leave their home, and come face their abuser in court. And I've also stood with the people who have been wrongfully accused and seen what that system does to those individuals. So I think the DA's role, yes, Arena's law is terrible. It was put forth as a reactionary response to a tragic situation, and I'm so sorry that that happened to that family. We all need to have a greater, more robust conversation about mental health in our community, because that's the only way that we stop that from happening. But right now, it's an unfunded mandate. Right now, we're forcing ourselves and forcing counties to fix this problem without any additional resources to make sure that people are actually safe. What can we do as the district attorney's office? What you should do is use that perspective, make sure you're giving the judge all the information, which people are going to be eligible for treatment court, which people are going to be most appropriate as safe individuals who can be back in the community and take advantage of their constitutional right to be viewed as innocent until proven guilty and have their day in court on a speedy fashion. All these words I'm saying are going to resonate because it's your constitutional right. Pretrial is there to facilitate basically the court system not doing its job fast enough. We need to make those decisions on the front end. The DA's role is to give the information to the judge and make sure that they're doing everything possible to make sure that we're having a just system that is giving people their fair opportunity in court and not just holding people on economic grounds. Because I'll remind you, separate and apart from pretrial, Ryan Houston was a very rich white guy who posted a $1.2 million bond. That has nothing at all to do with someone's race, their tendencies for violence. He was violent. He was released on something other than that, and that's the kind of socioeconomic problem I think we need to address if we're going to talk about keeping our community safe, because it should not be a mechanism that allows people who have resources to get out, while those who can't put 2 pennies together to post a bond are sitting there waiting for their day in court.
So I very much agree with what Mr. Moore said and what Ms. Booth said. This is a complicated issue. To keep it as focused as I can, as to pretrial in Buncombe County, it is in a limbo scenario right now, and it did arise out of the scenario with Brian Houston and some other things. And Mr. Moore is exactly right. Mr. Houston was very wealthy and posted that $1.2 million bond. But what is most important is that the DA shows up. And you can Google my name and see that I have a history, that I do show up in court and I do advocate for no bond when I believe someone's a danger to the community, because we often forget about the part that the purpose of bond is twofold. It's not just to ensure that that individual shows up to court, it's also to ensure the safety of the community. And in so much that pretrial, as it sits right now, will not supervise anyone over a Class H felony, working in conjunction with Irina's law that is keeping people in custody that otherwise are nonviolent and should not be taking up space in the jail. We have and with no additional funding for our local municipalities, and Sheriff Miller wrote a letter about it immediately about a week in, because already our jail was at capacity, and having to reach out to the other jails in the neighboring counties to say, hey, can you take some people from our jail? Because as a prosecutor, I can say that I am not interested in keeping low-level people who are not otherwise a danger to our community, but instead are, for example, unhoused, and so are picked up for trespassing or possession of drug paraphernalia, and instead redirecting those people through pretrial services when it is working properly, is in a position to divert those people to resources, to help them find housing, to go up to the Justice Resource Center, to connect them with treatment, to connect them with mental health treatment. That is what pretrial does at its best. What it should not do is supervise people who are extraordinarily dangerous, because that is where the DA needs to show up and say, that person, judge, I'm asking for no bond. I'm telling you under these circumstances that no amount of bond can ensure the safety of the community, and it takes courage to do that. Until Irina's law has changed, as a prosecutor, my plan and what I would do immediately would be to dedicate 2 prosecutors right now exclusively to the people in custody on misdemeanors and low-level felonies who are in custody solely because they have a secure bond. Because those cases can be resolved quickly, and they need to be resolved quickly, because otherwise we are in an insurmountable situation that is not safer for anyone.
Thank you. Candidates now have 1 minute to respond to each other, if they so choose.
So regarding House Bill 307, it's different than other states. Other states have decided that you can set a no bond for certain people when you can't ensure the safety of the community. House Bill 307 has the presumption when they make their first appearance, when they get charged with the magistrate, these folks are given no bond. And from a defense perspective, and I think my colleagues would agree, this is wild, because the burden shifts to the defense attorney to prove to the judge that they're not a danger to the community. And again, these people are all innocent until proven guilty. So that's what we're dealing with right now, starting December 1st of 2025. So we have people in Bladen County right now, like clear across the state, because our jail is, again, like Ms. Curdy said, exceeding capacity. So I
Thank
agree
you.
with
So
Ms.
sorry, it's 1 minute already.
We have to work on the jail. That's a priority.
All right, gonna get this right. So one of the most important things, we're talking around a very simple truth. Is the system moving the way that it should? Is it moving as quickly as it should? And are we finding Band-Aids to fix a greater systemic problem? The problem is these people are sitting in jail. People don't just sit in jail. That's happening for one of two reasons. They're being arrested and their cases aren't being tried, or we're just not doing anything with them. Either way, I will tell you as a county commissioner, the number of conversations that I've had with Sheriff Miller about how he needs things to work more quickly. He is incurring for this county and this community a great liability, because he has probably one of the hardest jobs I can imagine. Keep 420 plus people alive, no matter what condition they come into, provide for all their needs, provide for all their health care, and do so on a shoestring budget. That's really challenging. And I'm not making excuses for anyone, but I will tell you, no one wants to be in a position where they have to keep people alive like that indefinitely. So we need to have a good relationship. I do have a good working relationship with the sheriff, and I look forward to collaborating with him to help us achieve our safety and our jail goals.
Thank you. We're trying to collect the questions now. If you have any questions, if there's questions from the live stream, we'd like to get them back to Ella and Sophie so that they can have all of the questions. We're taking a little question amnesty period while we get the questions over to them. We're going to ask one additional question, and then we're going to begin to choose the questions from this stack of questions. So you still have a little bit of time to get over there, but now is when we're collating and walking through them. Okay, thank you. This next question, we're going to begin with Martin, then we're going to go to Katie, then we're going to go to Courtney, and let me grab my question. You'll have the same 3-minute, 1-minute format. As district attorney, what would you do to address previous miscarriages of justice? Do you see it as a priority to reconsider past cases? And if so, how would you prioritize cases for judicial reevaluation?
That's a great question. I'll share a little bit about the framework, because you're going to hear all of us talk about our experience, and you know lawyers, we're nothing if not humble. But one of the things that I think is most relevant is when we're talking about what our system is getting right and how we get those outcomes that are just, is having a perspective, right? Each of my colleagues, I've worked with Courtney for 4 years in the public defender's office. I worked as a defense attorney while Katie is working in the DA's office. The things that inform our perspectives are all equally valuable in some ways. What I bring to the table is what I hope you'll see as a well-rounded experience. I've worked in the trial setting. I've worked on both sides, helping people who are survivors, helping people who are defendants. But just as important, I've worked in the appellate and federal sectors. I've done those cases, and I've seen what happens when people take shortcuts. You want to find out how difficult it is to win a case in front of a Republican Court of Appeals? Practice in North Carolina. We have a crisis in terms of knowing that if we don't get it right at the first instance, you're probably not going to achieve justice as a criminal defendant. We have a Court of Appeals that is so overwhelmingly partisan, they won't hear cases fairly anymore. We have a Supreme Court. If you heard Anita Earls or Allison Riggs speak, you will hear the injustices that they face just trying to manage the caseload they've got. Those appeals come from people who are asking for justice at the trial level and didn't get it. So when we talk about what we can do to correct this, what we do to address those appeals, we try not to make those mistakes in the first place, and that means we put procedures and rules in at the trial level to make sure that we don't screw up and hope that the Republican Court of Appeals will fix this for us. That is not going to happen. We need just outcomes at the first instance, and we only achieve that when we have attorneys who are experienced and folks who understand what cases they want to make priority. We've been clear from the beginning. Feels like almost a year now. We're in July at this point. But I've told people from the beginning, we get that right by prioritizing our cases. For me, I've been very clear-eyed about this. We cannot prosecute every single case that we want to. Our system is not resourced for that. So we have to make decisions. And for me, it's gun crimes and domestic violence. Those areas where people are actually suffering, where we're seeing people's lives get ruined, where we're seeing violence happen to children, to people in our community who are the most vulnerable, we know that those things have to take a front seat, because as we're spending our time talking about other smaller issues, as we're talking about what someone's dealing with cannabis, we are missing an opportunity for justice, to achieve justice for someone who's actually being harmed, and our system could save them from that if we just made our priorities better. So I think the number one way we go about addressing this is being clear about our priorities and picking people who have supervisory experience in an attorney sense to know how to manage those things, to manage a budget well. And I don't think of very many people out west of Charlotte have a budget bigger than the $424 million that we've managed for the past 3.5 years responsibly on county commission.
So one of my roles that I presently have in your district attorney's office is I oversee the conviction integrity unit. And I say unit, that's a lie, it's just me. There's nobody else that does it. And I handle all of the cases in Superior Court. So that means, for example, today, I was in court on a 2007 murder where 3 people were charged, and one person gave a statement and did not get the benefit of that statement. And so that he is asking and claiming ineffective assistance of counsel. I'm the person who reviews those cases. I'm the person who actually fixes those miscarriages of justice, because the way it works is if you can appeal it up to the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals kicks it down and says, nope, no dice, then they still have the ability to claim if there are constitutional enumerated issues. For example, I received ineffective assistance of counsel that they can file what's called a motion for appropriate relief. I'm the person who handles those for our county. And so what I have the authority to do is when I look at them and I say, you know what, this is wrong. I can do what's called a consent, and I can say this person does not need to be in prison for their life. Instead, they've been in prison for 20. I'll talk to the family, and they can say 25 years is okay. I can agree to that, and I do that. On the other hand, when it's somebody who says that I drank 4 Locos, so I didn't know what I was doing when I stabbed my brother to death with a sword, I can look back at that and say, Leanne Melton was an excellent attorney, and if I know anything about that woman, she filed every possible motion in your defense, and oh, look, here it is, and say, Judge, this is nonsense, and this is not valid, and the state opposes it, and do not give it a hearing. I don't have an order in that case, but these are a public record, so I can talk about them because you can look them up yourself right now today. But that is what conviction integrity looks like. It also is what 10 years of experience looks like, because again, similar to the juvenile, once I get them in a very, very serious attempted murder, violent shooting, it's too late. On the back end, when we're having to fix it 20 years later, that's too late too. But what I can tell you is that I'm the person who takes the phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning when something terrible happens, and I base my advice to law enforcement, because let's be clear, we don't charge as district attorneys. We don't charge, but I advise them, and I say, this is based on the facts that are known to us right now, this is what you got. And they say, well, we'd really like first-degree murder, and I say, I hear you, you have second. That's that kind of discretion. What I can tell you is when a case, I'm the smell test. When a case is charged, if I don't believe that it happened, it never makes it into court because I have the courage to dismiss it. That's what 10 years of experience brings.
I think I might have forgotten the question, but can you repeat it, please? Sometimes when you're last, you have to refresh your memory here.
As DA, what would you do to address previous miscarriages of justice?
Yes. So as a public defender, one of the first things we get is a gold sheet, and that's their rap sheet, essentially, what that would be called. And I've always seen, I'm so sorry with this microphone, I've always seen, especially in Asheville, again, I've been here since 2005, that black men would have quite a record if they grew up here and they lived in Shiloh, public housing, overly policed neighborhoods. I've always seen, and I've been aware, many a times it's fallen on deaf ears, that their record is going to be different than someone that grew up somewhere else, right? Because they were overly policed, they were heavily policed. So I've always had that awareness, and I've seen that many a times. And I've seen that, the 90s prosecuting crack cocaine. I mean, I've seen that, and it's continuing now. Now it's trafficking in fentanyl, trafficking in methamphetamine. So it's you have to be aware of how folks end up in these situations. So yes, and so I'm against habitualizing low-level felonies, and that's because in my experience, you know, you take somebody with a low-level Class H felony and you look at their record, well, their record may be bad, but when you start thinking about how did they develop this record, is it where they grew up? Is it where they lived? I can tell you that I've had the pleasure of going to Livingston many years ago when Mike Lamb, he was not police chief back then, would climb over the Norfolk Southern Railroad track and use binoculars to spy on people in Livingston. And now they have flock cameras in all of the public housing areas. So you have to be so mindful of how people can get captured into the system when you're making choices for prosecuting them in their future for future crimes. And of course, their record always follows them. For example, when people are a level 6, oftentimes they are not eligible under the law for anything but active time. But sometimes we can manipulate and we can craft things, and I've done that many a times with some prosecutors to get them to a point where they can have an opportunity not to go to prison. To give you another example, over the years, I've had an elderly man, an African-American man, who had been incarcerated for low-level felonies. And when I asked him, do you have any children? He said no, and I caught myself, and I told him, I'm so sorry the government has taken that opportunity from you. And that's something you have to be aware of when you're looking at people's past and histories and where they come from, not to make the continuing mistake.
Candidates have 1 minute to respond to each other if they'd like.
So what I'm gathering from this, a couple key facts. One, let's not screw up at the trial level and get it right so we don't have to worry about this. And two, if we know that our system is fundamentally flawed, we have to pick our priorities. 3, even then, if we have a resource issue, if we know that we're going to have things that need to be readdressed, you need folks who have appellate experience and know what mistakes have been made and know how to fix them. I've seen that in both civil cases, in criminal cases, in state court, in federal court. But perhaps more important than that, leaning on the resources that your state provides you. We have an attorney general's office with which I have a very good relationship, talking to them, people who are specialists in post-conviction work, people who can use all the tools at our disposal at the state level, not just counting on Buncombe County to come up with more money for more public defenders and more prosecutors to do the same thing over and over again. Let's talk about systems change, and that's only going to happen when we're using all of our state tax dollars to help make this easier on counties, because this is not something that any one attorney is going to be able to fix by themselves.
Thank you.
And going back to what Katie mentioned, looking at past convictions would be, again, a priority as well in my office. I know Katie mentioned she is the post-conviction integrity unit. I would, of course, like to broaden that. Honestly, I was unaware that Mr. Williams had one because it's small. But I know she's working hard for sure. But because that's important. And to give you another example, I've had a case with a DA, and I was given a piece of discovery that was really interesting. And it was not the crime he was convicted of, a rape, but it was very close in time, very similar. And this was an African-American man who spent, I believe, over 20 years in prison. And this was not Miss Curtis, I just want to be clear. I could not get this ADA to help me one freaking bit. Because I said, can you look into this? This is crazy. Look at this. Can you call some people, see what we have? Was anybody ever prosecuted for this? Nothing. Nothing.
Thank you.
And so, again, that's something fundamental you have to do.
I can say, first of all, that at least as to me, it is my nightmare that I would ever prosecute somebody and convict them who is innocent. And one of my mantras as a prosecutor is, you can't make me do anything. And by that, I mean judges, I mean my boss, and I have quit a job because my district attorney in the 3rd District of Tennessee insisted that I prosecute a case that was an inappropriate use of force, and I refused. What I can also say is that Ms. Booth and I, for example, have probably had 50 cases against each other at least over the years, and we've never had to go to trial against each other. And we are both very capable and competent trial attorneys, and I dare say it's some of the best. And that's not because we work everything out just because, it's because we both have open doors, and I, as a prosecutor, have the courage to have those conversations. And when somebody comes to me and says, Katie, they got it wrong, this is not what it appears, I will listen and I will dismiss that case. I will change the outcome in that case. And that is what is required to be a strong district attorney.
Maybe I was a detective, but.
Thank you. The folks, if you're on the floor, there's a bunch of chairs over here. You're totally welcome to stay a little moment in time if you'd like to. We got another hour left. And then I'll also want to say, now we're going to take questions from the audience. Do we have questions ready? We have 3 minutes, 1 minute again.
Thank you all for your questions. We did our best to collate them, and there were some duplicates, so if we didn't get to yours, it's because we combined it with another question. The most pressing one here seems to be this. Given ICE escalation, what will you do to get safe and maintain community trust?
Right. So I think at this point in time, you can't have one size fits all for everything. I think you do have to consider immigration status for victims, for defendants, for their families, especially in this time where, just to give you an example, normally when folks don't do their 24 hours community service, they come in, they have a probation violation, and the ordinary pattern is, go to jail for 24 hours, it gets over with. That's a prime example of one size fits all is not going to work, because that person's going to come in, perhaps they didn't do their community service because they just didn't have the time because they're working so hard. And I actually saw this gentleman a few months ago. He was covered in paint, and he was making his first appearance, and he fortunately asked for a lawyer, so hopefully we could help him. But you can't have one size fits all. For defendants, for victims, you have to come at them with the understanding that, one, victims are fearful to come to court, and two, if we incarcerate fathers and mothers, we're taking those away from their families, and their children are off to assistance. Secondly, if we get hit, like we're hit, or like Minneapolis is being hit, obviously not a border state, but they chose it because of who they are and who their leaders are. Like I said, I'm from West Virginia. I will fight for the death for the right thing to do. Have no fear. A mom of a 13-year-old daughter, I will stand up. I will stand up if I'll do the right thing, and I would prosecute people that come in for agents that assault or, God forbid, murder someone in our community. And like I said, looking at the evidence, I have tried a case a week where a man was charged by a sheriff's officer on way less evidence than they had in Renee Good's killing. Way less. And you can ask any defense attorney, and we have tried some real peach cases with crappy investigations. To say that they didn't have enough was BS. Had that officer been charged, perhaps the killing this past weekend would have been prevented. So I would vow to keep the community safe. We have a right to protest. We have a right to stand up to the government. And that's what I've done for 20 years, is stand up against the government.
So can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Given ICE escalation, what will you do as DA to keep our community safe and maintain community trust?
So in 2020, that summer, as we all recall, we had a lot of protests downtown. And you recall the two gentlemen that showed up in Pack Square when people were painting "Defund the Police" on the road right there at Court Plaza, and two gentlemen showed up with AR-15s. And they were charged with possessing a firearm at a protest or demonstration. I had that case. I know that there was a lot of people upset in the community that the outcome in that was that they had a prayer for justice continued. But let me explain that to you. That law is constitutionally dubious because it puts the First Amendment against the Second Amendment, and I knew that, and we have to be careful as prosecutors what cases we put forward, because bad facts make bad law. That's not the one we want the Court of Appeals to decide, but instead saw an opportunity and instead required those individuals, in order for me to accept prayer for justice continued, to go take racial equity training. And I don't mean a little online class where you click the button. I mean the same one that I took along with some other court personnel. And by the way, I was one of two people, the other person being Meredith Presley Stone, who's now your Honorable District Court Judge. And when they came out of that, both of them said that they now understood what people were protesting about. And so that is the experience I already have. Now, what I can tell you is what's going on with ICE in Minneapolis is abhorrent and terrifying. And I would treat it the same as I would any other case. And here's what that looks like. I don't care who you are. I don't care your socioeconomic background. The question is, what is the law and what are the facts? And just the same as I deal with use of force investigations all the time, in so much that I will call for an investigation when I believe a crime has been committed. I've done it. I have done it. And ask for that to be investigated. And if the evidence says a crime was committed, I will prosecute that case. Full stop. Full stop. Whether you are a federal ICE agent or anything else, just the same as if you are a local law enforcement officer or Joe off the street. I'm sorry, Joe, I wasn't intentional. But Fred off the street. Nobody's named Fred, right? But the whole idea is that the law needs to be applied equally across the board, because in the cases, that's where you treat everyone the same. How you resolve cases is where you can say, which I would not give a benefit to somebody who is an ICE agent and who shot someone who was constitutionally there.
Evictions and custody enforcement is not making our community safe. They're not doing a thing to make our community safe. Doing harm, undercutting trust. To be completely clear, there's the world that I will seek ability for any person who harms someone, period. This violence that we're seeing is unprecedented, so we never thought we would be here. I keep saying we all have that idealism in 2016. Oh, this is going to be terrible, but we'll survive it. It's never going to happen again. And we're seeing round two of the same hatred, all the things that he so badly want to fight, happening in the worst ways and in the worst ways. So I think it's critical that we use every tool that we can to make sure that every community feels safe. I can share with you what we will do. I think all of us are going to offer some of the same answer. I want to share with you what I did do, because it wasn't a hypothetical for us. ICE was in Charlotte, and they were contemplating coming to Asheville. When that happened, we had a decision to make. Are we going to use our voices? Are we going to do that right now? But desperately, we need FEMA money, right? We're recovering from the worst disaster that we've been through, at least the last 100 years, is what I'm hearing. We need that money, and that money was being used as a weapon to hide from us an ability to speak what's happening in our community, to keep our neighbors safe. People who live with us, all of a sudden, are being balanced against this desire to get money from a government that's showing they're not going to give it anyway. When we had a chance to stand up, you saw acting who talked. The first thing we did, what do our neighbors need? For me, that meant calling SEMA, calling the people who know. I don't do this work every day. I'm not an immigration attorney, but I sure as hell know I need to ask the people who know what they're doing to find out what we do to our neighbors. We ask for guidance on that. Are we going to do harm if we take certain actions? Are we going to do harm if we say certain things? When we have those conversations, are we coordinating with our sheriff? What is our sheriff's role? What can the sheriff do? What can county commission do? For our end, that meant sitting down, missing a lunch, as lawyers often do, drafting with my colleagues, Commissioner Sloan and Commissioner Ball, a resolution and an ordinance. Is this going to have a positive impact for our community to send a message, not just to ICE, but to our neighbors, that you are welcome here, that you are safe, and we're going to do everything we can to protect you? That is what I feel about that. I'll give you the answer of what we may do, and that will disqualify us from trying that case if it ever happens. But I think the more important thing is, are we showing and living our values when that moment happens? Because it's not hypothetical. We lived through that. We got lost first time. Don't want to see it happen again, and that only happens when we have leaders who are willing to stand up, state their values, and tell them to knock this off, and what will happen to them if they harm people in our community.
Thank you. What did you get, Rond?
I'm going to follow up to say that by nature of my position and my role and the level at which I do it, because I handle the most dangerous of cases in our community at the highest level. What that means is that I work with federal agencies every day. I work with the FBI. I work with DEA and ATF and the U.S. Marshals Service in identifying the most high-risk individuals, people at the most risk for committing violence in our community, and also apprehending those people in our community, taking that phone call at 7:30 in the morning when Ricky Houston was on. And what I can tell you is that we are blessed with some really good officers, and that most officers go out every day and try and do the best job that they can. But what is happening, I think, and especially with ICE, is that there are so many people who have been recruited who are in here and are not being trained, and also situations are getting out of control, and I think emotions are so fair that exactly what Mr. Moore said, it's not making anyone safer, and least of all the officers who are out there. And I just think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, too.
Thank you. Next question. I think we're going to take Katie, then Martin, then Courtney.
All right. Is current approach to domestic violence effective? If not, what would change? If yes, why is it effective?
So I take that to mean the current approach to domestic violence within the office. And I need to qualify this to say, because I work within that office, I am in a position where I am not going to criticize the office as well. What I will say is how I prosecute cases as a domestic violence prosecutor and as somebody who presently prosecutes, I have 2 pending domestic violence homicides, which is two men, individual victim, and the four names that they missed one, but I prosecuted 2 of them. Domestic violence requires engagement. That means the moment that that warrant is taken out the next morning, it's on the first appearance calendar. I would have a dedicated assistant who makes phone calls to that survivor that day. And because what we know about domestic violence, right, if that person needs out of the home, they're probably going to change their number. What sense does it make to send an impact statement to that home if they have moved out of that home to get away from that person? So making that very quick day one contact so that we, 1, build that trust, 2, let them know that that case matters, and 3, let them know, hey, I understand if you need to move. Also, by the way, do you need connection with Helpmate? Are you aware that we have an emergency shelter? Are you aware of the resources that we have available to you? And you wrap around care all the way through. Because what we know is that it typically takes 7 times before somebody leaves an abusive relationship. And we also know that it's not the first time they call the police. Matter of fact, most people don't ever call the police. I'm one about that, right? And so I experienced that myself, and recognizing that I am a fierce advocate for survivors. It also means being able to try cases and not making that person go back to court any more times than they need to. They come to court the first time, you talk to them, and I will tell you, 85% of the time, that's just based on my own experience, prosecuting witness is going to come to court and she's going to say, I don't want you to proceed, it was just a misunderstanding, right? Because they love each other. And what I tell them is, I understand that. This person doesn't behave this all the time, because if they did, you wouldn't be with them. But I'm going to guess this isn't the first time, so maybe we can use this as an avenue to say, would you agree that maybe some anger management might help? Would you agree that maybe some treatment might help? And typically we can find some kind of path that will get that, at least some modicum of care, so they know that they have a safe space to come back. And in worst case scenario, prosecuting cases without presence of the prosecuting witness, that means being wily with the evidence and knowing about that 911 call and knowing about the body cam and knowing about the statements of the neighbor who called 911. If it was there, because there's a witness, I don't need the prosecuting witness there. And that's the best case scenario for getting accountability. And that's how I prosecute domestic violence.
So we do have wraparound services. Helpmate are always in the room, so that's wonderful, wonderful agents. So as far as that's concerned, I think that's going quite well. They're always helping us in and out of that particular courtroom is every Wednesday, so it's a particularized. What I think can be improved is, and this is across the board as well, people have jobs, people have kids to pick up. I'm one of those people. And expecting defendants and victims to come to a courthouse and sit from 9 to 5, like is required many days, is not okay. So I think
think that particular courtroom, the way it's been run right now, is being run very slowly, perhaps not very efficiently, and then folks are having to come back a multitude of times. So I think, like Ms. Curdy says, you know, they're the most vulnerable victims out there, right? Because it is a huge inconvenience when you have to come to the courthouse a multitude of times, you're told to come back at 2 p.m., and you know your kid's getting off the bus at 3 o'clock, to ask those folks to keep coming. Another thing that can improve is the empowering. I'm just going to get it out there. Most of these people are victims, okay? It's the majority. I've seen too many times them not empowering women, because sometimes something happens that's never happened before. And those folks come to court and say, I just want to drop the charges. And that's their voice that's not being heard. And they're denied their right to drop the charges. And so, and empowering a strong suit, making sure that services in place such help to ensure they're making the right decision.
I think this is a great one because it addresses one of the hard parts to talk in a 3-minute span. What are you expecting from the court system? We talk domestic violence court as a singular day. And that, for me, is already kind of the problem, right? That singular day is that that person appears in court. That doesn't mean that things shouldn't be done beforehand. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't be calling that person and finding out what they need. Are you receiving service? Where are you living right now? Are you in an economic situation you can live with anyone other than your spouse? A restraining order that says you live together. All those things are key factors in justice. If you talk about what people's choices are, I don't know what your choice is if you're forced into a situation that's built on you not having any other place to go. And until we address what's happening before we get to that courtroom, we're not going to achieve the outcomes. People don't have a real choice. This is an illusory choice. So a big part of this for me is, as a DA, we have a lot of great things in our community. We have a family justice center that has housed in it help our voice, a sheriff, a deputy from the sheriff's office, people who are SANE nurses who provide sexual assault kits and help people through these traumatic times. I think I might be the only person on the stage who's gone into civil court with someone and seen someone attacked, called a lawyer because they just happened to have a friend who happened to be a lawyer, drove over to the center, and I got to witness firsthand how difficult it is to go through a process that's supposed to be therapeutic and transformed. From the moment you walk in there, you're describing every bad thing that ever happened to you. They're asking you to relive every bad moment. And you're expecting that person to go in the court and repeat that again for a person they've never met before wearing a black robe in a pretty unkind setting. One of over 100 numbers. This is a part of a greater system that we have to change how we do this. I don't see how we change that without having more than 1 day of court a week for something as serious as domestic violence. We need that a day. We need to stop messing with these silly level charges that do not keep people safe, focus on prioritizing the cases that mean, though, in terms of helping people achieve justice. And I think we can only do that if we're direct about our priorities. I am committed to getting we don't have our powers to have their case together. That's another month potential harm. That's another month that people are making decisions about their socioeconomic status that have nothing to do with what they might want in court. And that's what I care most about as district attorney, making sure that we're giving people a choice and a real choice and supported from the beginning all the way through the end of that system, of course.
Thank you. Candidates have 1 minute to respond.
So I started my career as a sworn prosecutor in Durham as their domestic violence prosecutor. And you want to talk about a place struggle with some very bad socioeconomic boundaries, but you also deal with people who, we talk about this already being the most vulnerable, but also face real retaliation of gang violence. What I did in Durham, I'm thankful that I did it, is a very extensive training. I went to national conferences. I learned about gunshot, I learned about translation, and I learned about trauma. And one of the most important things I believe that we could do and that I would do as district attorneys, ensure that our domestic violence prosecutors have the same level of training that I had, so that when they come in that courtroom, they can separate the wheat from the chaff or recognize, well, somebody could die in this scenario from the, this is a one-off bad day.
Forgot to mention, I think Ms. Curdy said we can track cases. And forgot to mention that I like to track cases. So I am not scared putting these up there. And again, Ricky Houston is a prime example.